So that's when I had decided that I was going to chase after the dream of opening a coffee shop. Hey everybody, welcome to Joe on the Go. It's a podcast on coffee trucks, trailers, and espresso carts. Everything mobile coffee, mobile wandering barista. My name is Vince. I'm your host. I'm the owner of Green Joe Coffee Truck. We are a do-it-yourself coffee truck business that we teach people how to build coffee trucks, trailers, and espresso carts. So this podcast, this is episode 1, and I will be sharing my story on how I got started in coffee trucking. I got started in coffee trucking. The story goes, I was working, this is years ago, I was working as a paramedic for Albuquerque ambulance. I had been a paramedic for about 7 years. And I was slowly building up my resume to go to PA school. I was kind of on the fence between PA and MD, and I really played with that for a while. I ended up deciding that PA was probably a better fit for me, just because I like to dabble in so many different things. I felt like not being a specialist would favor my life a little bit more. So I was working towards getting into medical school, into PA school. I was working at an urgent care and then doubling up on the ambulance. So I had spent 2 years at an urgent care and about 7 years with my local 911 service here in Albuquerque ambulance, just being a 911 medic. And I was working swing shift. I had the Thursday, Friday, Saturday shift, 1605. And anybody that's worked those hours in emergency medicine knows that those are pretty hot hours. You get a lot of the car accidents from your 5 o'clock rush hour. Once those are over, you're usually running calls in the evenings. People start getting lit probably about, I'd say you probably start running your first calls around 7, 8 o'clock. And then you just keep running those calls all the way throughout the evening, usually to about 3 a.m., 4 a.m. And then usually about 3 a.m., 4 a.m. is where it gets really nasty, because that's when the alcohol starts to wear off and people are tired and they just start shooting and stabbing each other. That shift was just hell on wheels. It really was. We ran a lot of critical calls. I spent about 7 years doing that, and just to be honest, there was a couple calls that affected me psychologically that I really started building up kind of a callous towards medicine, towards emergencies. I started judging emergencies, which sounds kind of weird. Like, why would you judge an emergency? But when you see this stuff day to day, you start kind of comparing things, and you also start going, well, don't be an idiot. Like, you see a lot of just, people doing stupid things. And so after a while you go, well, this is your fault. Like, what'd you think was going to happen, right? Which is the exact opposite of my definition of compassion. I'll kind of tell you a story since I got you here. When I was working as a paramedic, I had ran a head-on collision where a family of 4 collided with a couple of 2, and the 2 were the couple were the ones that were drunk, and they went across the yellow line and boom, collided with a family of 4, and it killed the 2 parents instantly. So the couple and the 2 parents, they were dead. There was no saving them. And so the 2 daughters in the back were the ones that were still alive, and there was a younger daughter, maybe about 7, 8 years old, and an older daughter, probably about 13 or 15. The younger daughter, I was first on scene, and so I flew the younger daughter out. With these type of calls, you usually get a helicopter launched right away. And you can always call them off when you get to scene, but if you do need them, then they're already on the way. So I needed them, so I flew out the younger one, and then I transported the teenager in the back of the ambulance. I'm working on IVs and checking to see for bleeding, this type of stuff. And I remember she asked me, "Are my parents dead?" And I told her, "Yes, your parents are dead." And so I transported her to the hospital, and she made it, she lived. And I remember my partner afterwards was like, you shouldn't have told her that. She's under enough stress. There's no reason for you to add more to it. It was my partner's standpoint or point of view. And she was absolutely right that is going to add more stress to her life. But I also felt like if I were in her position, I would want to know, you know, like, and I felt like she deserved to know. And so I was just honest with her. Well, anyhow, the following week, I ran a rollover accident. And this particular rollover accident happened at pretty low speed. It was a guy came off the interstate and just hit a ditch. Basically, he was trying to exit and he just kind of lost control, hit a ditch, and it was just enough to get his vehicle up and over for a rollover. This was, he happened to have his hands on the A-frame. He lost his fingers. And so we transported him to the hospital. These type of calls, I always made it a point to go out into the waiting room and talk to the family, right? Like I'm the transporting paramedic. It's my responsibility to talk to the family and just let them know what I saw and what's going on from my perspective. I obviously don't give guarantees, that type of stuff, but just like, hey man, this is what I saw. So I talked to his mother. And I went out there and I said, look, his vital signs are doing great. I didn't see any significant trauma, no broken bones from what I could tell. And when I gave him, when I handed care over, he looked great. He had lost his fingers, and I said, but however, he did lose his fingers to his right hands. And the mother just exploded, right? Just bawling, just screamed at me. And I didn't see that coming at all. I was like, just kind of in shock, like, oh my God. So it turns out that he had a scholarship to school. He was a guitar player. So, losing those fingers was huge in his life. And that basically, that was my definition essentially. And again, my partner read me for that one with good reason. So, I mean, the lesson that brought to my life was that compassion was the definition of basically looking at a person's emergency, and it's not the emergency itself, but how they take to the emergency, and just having empathy with how they take. That was essentially what taught me compassion. As I came to the end of my 7 years, I had lost that on the ambulance. I was no longer relating to how people felt about their emergency. It was, to me, just comparing emergencies, apples to apples, right? There was an abdominal call, which was a fairly legitimate call. And I remember working on the ambulance, and we had to go to the hospital because you can't diagnose anything from the streets when it comes to abdominal. It's very difficult. And I remember just kind of knowing that, like, okay, I can't do anything here. We need to go. But instead of saying that, I said something along the lines of just get on the fucking gurney. Just something like nasty, right? And that was it for me. That was the defining moment in my career where I knew I was done. I said, okay, Vince, like, this guy's got a legitimate call and you're treating him like junk. And so I made the decision at that point to not invest into my medical career because I felt like I was going to put myself into debt and also have compassion fatigue. And I felt when I would come out of school that I would just end up hating my job, that I would just kind of hate life. And so I said, okay, that's it for me. I'm done with medicine. So I hung up that hat. I remember coming home and talking to my girlfriend at the time, my wife now. But she was my girlfriend at the time, and I remember telling her, like, I think I'm not going to go to PA school. And I remember her going like just in complete shock, like, what? Like, what do you mean you're not going to PA school? And I said, yeah, I think I'm done with medicine. And she was kind of like, just really taken back from it. And she said, well, what are you going to do? There was kind of a little bit of a weight taken off my chest because I was like, what am I going to do? Right? Like, if I'm not going to do this, then what am I going to do for a living? What am I going to do with my life, you know? And I was like, I always wanted to open up a coffee shop. And she was like, a coffee shop? I remember her like, what? And I was, yeah, I kind of want to open a coffee shop. And she was just like, you don't, like, you're not like, where is this coming from? So that poor girl, I dragged her through hell, but she stuck it in there. So that's when I had decided that I was going to chase after the dream of opening a coffee shop. At the time, I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know anything about, I had very limited entrepreneur experience. I had no barista experience. And I was like, just like, okay, like, how am I going to do this? So I decided, well, maybe I'll start off with a coffee truck. Like, start off small, kind of get something. That's something I learned as a paramedic. Start off with the basics before you go advanced. So I was like, well, maybe I'll start off with a coffee truck. And I don't think I had ever seen a coffee truck before, to be frank. I don't think there was, I never went to a coffee truck. I don't ever remember seeing any coffee trucks driving down my city. I think I had heard about them, but that was it. So, I started looking into coffee trucking. Like, okay, what is this going to take? How do I get into coffee trucking? Well, the first thing I found was there wasn't much out there. There was a blog on coffeeforums.com written by a guy named Mr. Shave, who did coffee out of Hawaii. And he had written a pretty decent blog in that forum about how he got started and just kind of updating things. I think he kind of did it more for a little bit of accountability, kind of, holding himself accountable to that community. That's speculation, but let's just say it wasn't a very thorough. It was kind of like, hey, I tried to put in the generator today and it didn't work, like this type of thing, So I didn't have any information on how to do this, and I was like, So I started kind of just digging around and seeing, like, okay, how do you get started doing this? This episode of Joe on the Go is brought to you by my Coffee Truck Crash Course. So the Coffee Truck Crash Course is a 4-week course that is just a full immersion course into the industry of coffee trucking. Each week you're given a homework assignment. We meet up once a week to discuss that homework assignment as a group and guide you through the process of the different elements of coffee trucking, to include the cost, code and regulation, equipment, and even mobile barista coffee catering. This course is really for anyone that's getting serious about coffee trucking, whether or not you're building a coffee truck on your own and you need guidance with hiring labor and materials, or if you are purchasing a coffee truck and you need guidance on things like equipment and what to look for when purchasing the coffee truck, or if you're getting a coffee truck built from a builder. This course really kind of covers it all. So the link is in the description below. I hope to see you in our course. I had this idea originally, Green Joe. I didn't even have the name, nothing. It was, my first thought was to get one of those little fiberglass campers and paint it like a coffee bean, because the fiberglass campers are like, they're cute, they're round, and they kind of resemble a coffee bean. So I thought, oh, well, that would kind of be cool, get one of those campers and paint it like a coffee bean. So I started looking for a camper, and during that time, I had left medicine. I got a job doing retail. I was working in the supplement industry. I had kind of escalated my position from being a sales associate to a manager, from being a store manager to a kind of a regional director. So I was moving rank. I was making good money, but I was working a lot. I was on salary, and so the hours were very much extended. And it was a good experience. It taught me a lot about business. It taught me a lot about sales, so I have to give credit there. It was a stressful job. And I remember looking back at that time in my life and just not really liking who I was. I was scared. So when my personality, when I get scared, I get arrogant. That's what comes out in me, unfortunately. So I was arrogant. I had a lot of ego. I was stressed all the time. I had gained weight, and just, even though I was in the supplement industry, you would think being in the supplement industry, you would take care of yourself. But with the hours I was working, I wasn't very happy. So I was packing money away and researching this whole concept of a coffee truck. Finally, I got 15 grand saved. So I got $15,000 put in the bank. It took me just shy of 2 years to do that. So I got my 15 grand saved, and I got married to my wife. I asked her to marry me. And the following month I quit my job. It was off to the races. So I quit my job, and then we went on a honeymoon to Europe and spent a whole bunch of money. So here I am, no job and a bank account that's going down. And I just started digging into this concept of coffee trucking. The first thing I did is I found a trailer in Lubbock, Texas. We went out, I live in Albuquerque, and so Lubbock, I thought Lubbock was only about 6 hours away. My wife will laugh at me still to this day about that. I said, well, we'll be back by this time, and that wasn't it. So we got back real late that day. But the trailer popped up on Craigslist on a Thursday, and I was out there Friday. We went out to Lubbock, Texas, took a look at the trailer, and I didn't know what I was buying. I didn't know how to inspect trailers at that time. I didn't know what to look for in a trailer. I had no concept whatsoever. It was super cute, and it didn't have water damage, and that was like the two things that I was looking for. So I paid $2,500 in cash, grabbed the title, hooked it up to my Ford Ranger that I owned at the time, and I was off to the races, headed back into town. And from there, it was a lot of research, digging into health code. I didn't know much about health code at the time. Digging into a lot of the RV stuff to figure out how to do plumbing, how to do electric. I mean, those were big things that I just had no concept. I didn't have any handyman experience, very, very limited, not very many tools. But I was motivated, I was motivated. I made a lot of mistakes. And along the way, I started kind of documenting that journey. Started doing how-to videos as I put in like vinyl flooring. Started doing how-to videos on like my sinks, and hey, this is how I'm doing my walls, and this is my espresso machine that I got, and kind of all these things, and just slowly start piecing things together. I kept track of my receipts, so I knew how much I was spending. I had created this deadline in my head to have the coffee truck started by September 1st, 2015. We held our grand opening on September 5th, so technically I was 4 days late. But that was because when I got it painted, because it was kind of this eggshell white. When I got it painted, I painted it lime green. The painter that he was an automotive painter that did the job. I think he did a total of 7 coats. He said that the paint they had used before was some type of marine paint and was just soaking up his paint. And he's like, I had to just keep putting paint and paint and paint. So I was over in my deadline because of the unexpected known that paint job was going to soak up so much paint. But he ended up doing an absolute wonderful job on the truck, and we did it the trailer, excuse me, and we did it lime green, and we named it Green Joe Coffee Truck. And the name Green Joe, I sat on the name for a long time. I'm in Albuquerque, that's where Breaking Bad was filmed, and so for a long time I was playing with ideas of doing spin-offs off of that, like Breaking Caffeine, or I don't know, whatever. And I had a hard time coming up with a brand name. I just like, what am I going to name this thing? Well, at the time I was researching a ship that my great-grandfather came on, Vincenzo, the man I was named after. And he had come over in 1912 on a passenger ship from Naples, Italy to Ellis Island. That's how my great-grandfather got to the country. And that ship was named Giuseppe Verdi after an Italian composer. But the Giuseppe Verdi was a ship that just made transatlantic passenger trips. And it did it from, I believe, 1912, maybe a little earlier than that, I think 1918, where it was decommissioned. And later on, it was sold to Japan during World War II because the Italians and the Japanese were in cahoots together. It's off the coast of Papua New Guinea, currently on my bucket list to go see. But that ship, Giuseppe Verdi, or Joe Green, was what brought my my grandfather to the country. And so I decided that if that's the vessel that carried him to the American dream, I was going to name my vessel after that. That's the, that carries me to the American dream. So I named it Green Joe. And if you look at the logo, my logo is an actual ship, and that's just a cartoon variation that I had someone make for me for my logo. And it says established 1912, but that's not, of course, when the company was established. That's when my grandfather came over. That's when the American dream in my family was established. And so that's where we got the name Green Joe Coffee Truck. We opened up on September 5th, and our grand opening was huge. It was my #1 grossing day for, I think, I'd like to say 6 months. It was a big day for me, and I just got my butt kicked that day. I remember that week, my local community college, CNM, where I had actually got my paramedic degree, they had opened up, someone had fallen through with their restaurant, and so they closed their restaurant inside and had opened up their doors to food trucks. They created a food truck program, so they wanted to inspire food trucks and kind of get that going. Albuquerque is real interesting because we have a pretty saturated food truck industry, because it's kind of, the backstory on this is we have a problem with drinking in this town, and drinking and driving is a huge issue for us. What they've done is created a lot of laws to try to prevent that, specifically liquor licenses. And so there's very limited amount of liquor licenses. So there's been this kind of way about this wraparound that folks have done. They've created breweries and opened up breweries. And so we have kind of this microbrewery culture here that's really taken off. They've created some pretty fantastic beers here. And so, but the problem with the breweries is they often don't have their own kitchen, so they've allowed food trucks to be outside their locations. And so the food truck industry here in Albuquerque really took off because of that. Well, anyhow, the local community college started a program trying to educate people on food trucks, which is great. They still have it. They opened their doors to food trucks. And I wasn't the first food truck in, but I was like to say the second or the third, and I was definitely the first coffee truck in. And at that time, there was very limited coffee trucks in Albuquerque. That's what I did. I got started. I was basically moonlighting it. I was working from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. and I would close my doors at 10 and then go to my day job. And I think it was like, I would like to say maybe 2 months into it, when I was having to close my doors to a line of 10, or I'd be late to work. We were starting to see $500 days. So it was just kind of running those numbers and saying, well, if I continue to see $500 days, that's going to be $10,000 months. So I decided to quit my day job and just focus full time on the coffee truck. And it was just really balls to the walls after that. My wife got pregnant with my first daughter. So that first year I was just taking every gig that I could, because at that point I was the sole provider financially of the family. And I worked my tail off. I did community college during the day, and I would do hospitals at night. I would do events on the weekends, weddings, farmers markets, 5Ks, anything, you name it. I would try to book it and go. And I was just working. And it was good. It was good work because it was work for myself. So I would average probably 50 hours a week, but it didn't take as much toll on me because, I was finally making my own dollar, and I had built something, and it was becoming successful. So I had a pride that was involved into that. Our first year, we ended up with 2 coffee trucks. I had a trailer, and then I purchased a truck itself, like a panel van, Chevy Grumman, a Chevy P30, excuse me. So we had the 2 trucks in the cart, and I had a full-time employee who was my brother, and he worked for me for, how long did Tony end up? I'd love to get him on the show at some point because we have some stories. But he worked for me for the greater part of, I would say, 2.5, maybe 3 years. And we had a wonderful experience. He was really a pleasure to work with. It's funny. he worked the window because he's more bubbly than I am. He's got a great personality. He's real outgoing. He's one of those guys that'll have you talking about yourself and laughing in the first 5 minutes, right? And so I said, okay, you're on the window, you know. And he's the good-looking one, you know. So he's the good-looking one, and I always argue I'm the one that got the brains. You got the looks, you know. He worked the window, and I worked the machine, and we rocked it out. And we did our first year. We did just a little over 110. It was great. It was really, really great. By the second and the third year, CNM started bringing in, the community college started bringing in other coffee trucks. So they're starting to cut my hours. The writing started getting on the wall that fountain was going to dry up. I made the push to open up my coffee shop. I started searching for places to open up my coffee shop. I found one on Craigslist. A gentleman named George rented me this cute little house. It was in an office district, so I was zoned. My zoning was a little bit weird. I had to put in some variations, some exemptions for my zoning. You know, during that time, I had asked if I can get started on that without paying rent, and he said yes. There was 2 locations that was really had stuck out to me, and I was really having a hard time picking between those 2 locations. And I ended up going with that location because I felt, really because of George, the landlord. He was a child psychologist by trade or by job, forensic psychologist. I'm not quite sure the difference, but really he was just a wonderful person to work with. Not an ounce of maliciousness in him. I had felt that, you know, I was going into a risky business. I was very aware that the business may go under. George allowed me to sign the contract under a new LLC, which means that it separated my liability from my personal liability from the business liability. So if that business went under and went into debt, then my personal assets wouldn't be held responsible. And so he allowed me to do that. And the other location was just a good location, probably even a little bit better of a location, but it was owned by real estate agents. And I felt like I would be swimming with the sharks. Being so new to business, this is maybe my second or third year in business, I didn't feel prepared for that. I felt like if I got into that contract, and especially if I got under that contract under either my personal or my Green Joe coffee truck business, that if that business went under, I would lose all my assets, and I didn't want that. I decided to go with George's location, which is in Nob Hill. It's kind of like, it's our shopping district in Albuquerque. It's pretty close to our university district. It's on Route 66, so it's very much a tourist area. You know, the local community is very engaged in, like, you know, their neighborhood association and whatnot, and they really do support local business. And so I felt there was a lot of reasons to justify that. And I said, okay, well, you know, we can do the school. And there had been a business that went out on that same block that was a coffee shop, and they had gone out of business a year prior. Satellite Coffee, if any of you guys are watching this in Albuquerque, it was the Satellite Coffee on Central and Carlisle. Well, they had gone out of business, but not because of financial reasons or not because of low business or something like that. It was because they had, I think, like, and I don't know the exact, so I don't want to go too much into it, but there was some embezzlement or something like that within the company, and they had to consolidate in order to stay afloat. So that location was a good location. It was just they had gone out, and because of X, Y, and Z, I felt like I could fulfill or fill that void. And so that's why I picked up that location. And my wife was really into yoga at the time, and we thought, wouldn't it be grand if we opened up a coffee shop that was mixed with like a yoga studio? We thought that was just, you know, the greatest idea in the world. You know, we said that's we just thought that we were all that clever, you know. And so so we opened up Helix, which is a coffee shop and a yoga studio combined, because it was a mom and pop shop. We felt like DNA represented that really well, because your DNA, of course, is your paternal and your maternal intertwined. And so here we're a mom and a pop intertwined. And so We opened Helix Coffee and Yoga House. We ran, and I still had Green Joe Coffee open. We ran that business for just under 2 years. I ended up closing Helix. And this is why, because when I had opened up Green Joe Coffee Truck, maybe about a year into, I started taking the blogs that I had been writing on my website and started consolidating them into a book. And so what I did is I purchased a book from Amazon. It was Amazon's #1 bestseller on how to open a coffee shop. And I just put that in front of my computer. If that book talked about pre-marketing activities, I talked about pre-marketing activities. If it talked about supplies, I talked about supplies. So I just used it essentially as a template to create a book on how to open up coffee trucks. And I put that out on the website for sale. And I put it at the time I was only selling it for $50. And I sold 3 that night. And I said, well, holy cow, what is this? It was such an eye-opening experience, because one of the reasons I was so attracted to coffee trucking is I was really interested in passive income. I wanted to build a life where if my wife and I decided to move somewhere, I would still have income coming in. Or if we decided to live on the road for a while and do a bunch of traveling, I would still have income coming in. So just kind of seeing how passive income worked, I had read a book years ago, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and that's one of the topics he talks about. Now he does it through real estate, and I didn't have any interest in being a landlord, but I had seen kind of like this online business start to pick up. Bloggers were making money. There was the Amazon gold mine that happened, the Amazon gold rush, and I thought, man, I could really get started doing something like that. So I put up a bunch of stuff on Amazon and bought all these seminars and all these, get rich schemes on YouTube that you always see pop up. I'm sure there can be one during my video at some point. But I had done a bunch of and I didn't make anything. At one point I was selling onion goggles on Amazon, and that was a bust. And I had like cold brew coffee filters in a mason jar, and that was another bust. So there was all these different things that I was trying to find like the right product, so to speak, and to build income. And here under my nose, Green Joe Coffee Truck, there was a need. There was no information prior to when I put it out. And so I was the first one to really come along and put out some type of consolidated how-to guide. And I had kept all my receipts from when I built the truck, and so I categorized them and totaled them up, and I had done some how-to videos along the way, so I put those in the book, and so I released that, and that had started building some income. And I didn't see much off of that in the beginning. I probably saw, if I had $500 a month, that was a good month for me. It had really taken years to kind of build that, but I started kind of working on the website's SEO, trying to learn about how SEO works, and started just trying to build that website. Well, by the time I was 2 years into Helix, that website was doing pretty good, Green Joe Coffee Truck's website. And I had really started building a name for myself as being kind of this consultant for coffee trucking. And as I went along, at this point, I now had 2 trucks in the cart. And so I had learned a thing or two about build outs and whatnot, and about code. And now that I had opened up a coffee shop, I knew about restaurant regulation. And so the education was slowly building. Well, by our second year, or by year 2, what was happening, there was a few things. We had really slow months in January, February, March. And there at the coffee shop, I needed to pull in $6,000 in order to eat. That's what I had to make every month in order for me to grab a bite to eat, right? So $6,000 was the bare minimum I needed to make. Well, January, February, March, I would only make about 3. And so we were really taking a hit during those months. The shopping, again, I was in that shopping district, and there was no shopping happening during those times. So I would go roughly about 10K into the hole as I came out of late winter, early spring. It would be off to the races and try to make it up during the summer by doing farmers markets with the coffee trucks and all the different events. But it was taking its toll on me. I would have to get into the shop usually about 5:30, 6 in the morning. And I usually wouldn't get home until about 5, 6 at night, and I was working weekends. So it was, it was stressful. I was running 2 businesses and still trying to do the online stuff. And at that point in my life, I didn't realize less is better. I thought more is better. I thought, why not? Why can't you do all these things? But I was just wearing myself thin. What had happened is we were 18 months into it, maybe a little bit longer, and we had both pulled ourselves off of the payroll so that we can try to build the assets of the company. And even with us both off the payroll, I had got a supplemental job, she had got a supplemental job. We were only making like $1,000 or $2,000 profit a month, once all the bills were paid. That was about what my ebook was making. And so it was the big catalyst to that decision of closing the shop was my wife got pregnant with my second daughter. Once that happened, it was like, I don't want to work myself to death for, an extra $1,000, $2,000. So we made the decision to close the coffee shop. And that was a hard decision. We fought that one for a while because we both just worked our ass off to get that thing going. It really, really put in a lot of hours to build it. And in some ways it was a really beautiful thing. And then in some ways it was really difficult. It was hard on our marriage. Our relationship became a working relationship, and it became a working relationship where we had 2 businesses that basically had their own responsibility for the bills. And if the bills weren't getting paid, then naturally we start going, well, what's your business bringing in, And it wasn't good for us. It wasn't good for us. So we closed it. It was probably one of the best decisions we made. After I had closed Helix, I had a couple of big months on Green Joe. I think I had like a $12,000 month. So I was able to come out of Helix and then still get a little bit of money. Green Joe, the coffee truck, was, there was an event where, it was a good event. Someone wanted to book me for like $4,000, and I just didn't want to do it. I was burnt out on the truck. I sold the coffee truck to a gentleman, a real estate lawyer out of San Francisco, that he was trying to get out of his corporate job, and he picked it up, and he operates currently in Los Alamos, and they're still in business. And at that point I said, okay, I just need a break. I had been working hard for years. At that point I focused on the Green Joe website. I built a business plan. I hired a consultant to help me build the business plan. Wonderful gentleman named David Sayers. And he helped me. He was a loan officer with a nonprofit, and he helped me write out this business plan. And as I was writing it, I had been in business for 4 or 5 years at this point with the coffee truck, and I was writing the business plan to help people get financing. But I felt that there was a lot more to that I could give. What I started doing is just really pouring in my 2 cents on how to operate a coffee truck. Little things like, I'll give you an example. One of the things that I learned is that instead of posting a picture, like if I made a new drink, say, fall came, okay, and it was time to do pumpkin chai or pumpkin or whatever, and I needed to present this new drink to my audience, rather than just taking a post and putting it up on Instagram, what I would do is I would make an event, and I would make like this huge week-long event, and I would invite people to it, and if they tagged their friend, I would say, tag your friend to get 25% off, or tag your friend to, get buy one, get one free, What it did is it really got the word out that this thing was happening. And so you learn like those little hacks along the way on how to do things like social media. So I felt that the business plan was my opportunity to really just kind of pour it all out, and it's like, this is what I've learned from coffee trucking. So we did that, and we just put all the extra information, we highlighted that in yellow so that people can delete it. They don't have to send my 2 cents to their loan officer because they don't want to see that stuff, right? So we made it so it's kind of like you can trim it down before sending it off to your underwriter. and I put that up for sale on the website, and that started selling. So so now I had the ebook and a business plan. One of the things that I wanted to do is I wanted to teach people how to get into coffee trucking if they had little or no money, because I kept seeing this environment. There was an injustice happening, in my opinion. There was like, I was seeing people go into, you know, $75,000, $100,000 in a debt to get a coffee truck. Gals particular, because the gals didn't want to drive a trailer. They wanted a truck that they can get in and not have to back up a trailer, whether that's because of comfortability or you know, just fear of not being able to move the trailer. I'm not quite sure. But there was a lot of hesitation with getting a trailer. And so a lot of the gals would get trucks. And with the trucks, they were getting themselves into like, you know, 75, 100 grand. And I'm like, that's a mortgage, right? Like that's, you know, and it's at a higher interest rate, you know? So I was seeing people go out of business because of that business decision. As they went out of business, they would come out in the hole. And so I saw that injustice occurring, and I wanted to do something about it. So I set out on this thing to build this, what I called the ultimate coffee cart, so that people can start off with a coffee cart and then move into a coffee trailer when they accumulated the funds. Because with my coffee carts, we would do farmers markets, and I would make $500-600 a day at the farmers markets. So I thought, okay, well, if a single mom wanted to get into coffee trucking, and let's just say she didn't have a whole bunch of money, maybe she had a couple grand in the savings account, with a good tax refund check and some of her savings, she would be able to get an espresso cart for about 5 grand and start hitting the markets. If she was able to take the $500 that she was making at the market or dog park or wherever you know, whatever, you know, 5K runs, whatever you do on the weekends, she could keep her day job, work Saturday mornings, take that income, and then just pack it away. And if you were to do $500 a day, let's just say four days a month, that's going to be around 2 grand. Over the course of the season, she's going to accumulate anywhere between 10 to 20 grand. And that's going to be enough to get a trailer. And then she can get herself her cart, because she already has the espresso machine, get that thing into the trailer, and now she can work through the winter and start doing more events because, you know, she's under a roof now. So it was a way to get into the coffee trucking industry if someone was limited on funds, you know, because if you're limited on funds, then you usually have a little bit more time. If you're limited on time, then you usually have a little bit more funds. It's the balance of life. I wanted to create a pathway for those folks that had like kind of low or no credit and low or no money, and be able to kind of work their way towards to coffee trucking, you know, chase their dreams. I wanted to help that. So I started this project called the Ultimate Coffee Cart, in which I wanted to make a coffee cart that would kind of be for the masses. I started teaching coffee truck courses. It's a 12-week course where I would guide people through, you know, the hoopla, the regulations and the equipment and the management of labor and that type of stuff, and just kind of show people, guide people along the way on how to build these things out. So I started teaching those classes, and as I started teaching, I started reading everyone's code. And I read a lot of codes, a lot of different regulations: LA, New York, Chicago, Austin, you know, Miami, Dade County, all these different codes. And although there's not a national standard to food truck or to food truck code, there are certain things that started standing out, pattern recognition, right? You start seeing things, okay? Most of these places want, you know, a 20 or larger gallon tank. Most of these places need a hand washing station. Most of these places require, you know, X, Y, and Z. But one of the issues that I saw was that in most of the places, it did not have an espresso cart regulation. And in fact, most of the time, you had to call up a health inspector to find out what the specific code for that would be. And a lot of times those health inspectors didn't have it. So they were saying, well, why don't you send in a plan and I'll approve it if I like it, type of thing. It was kind of a hard hit, because I was trying to create this pathway for people to take, and what come to find out, the red tape was really preventing that pathway. I said, okay, I don't think I'm going to be able to do a ultimate coffee cart. Well, why don't we do an ultimate coffee truck? A coffee truck that kind of meets 90% of the codes out there. And so that's what I started working on, was developing this truck concept that the plumbing in the truck, the electric in the truck, the equipment in the truck is going to meet the code for 90% of the different codes out there. You know, there's a few individual codes that are slightly different. LA requires certain screens on your window. You know, Chicago is going to want an inline generator. So there's certain codes that are a little bit different, but I could create this template, so to speak, that will meet the majority. And that would allow me to be able to automate the template to produce these coffee trucks faster, because essentially I'd be able to produce it in this one style. Anyone could take it, and then, you know, they'll have to make a few last minute revisions, but they'll be able to get their truck up to code fairly quickly without having to wait. And by doing that, I would be able to keep the cost down low. You know, it's kind of like, it's essentially how Henry Ford did his assembly lines. You know, by keeping and sticking to one specific template, he was able to mass produce his Model T faster and at a cheaper rate than everybody else who are doing like kind of custom jobs. That's where the famous quote comes from: you can have it in any color as long as it's black. Because essentially he was saying, like, look, we're going to build the truck with the best value so that we can keep the cost down, because he believed the more you keep the cost down, the more you're going to sell. And he was absolutely right. It's how he became, you know, such a huge monumental icon. Just taking a page off of his book, I said, okay, well, let's create a template that meets the majority of codes. That's basically been my latest project, and that's been working really well. And what we've been doing, which works out pretty well, is through that template, whenever someone buys a truck, we'll haul it to them and then do a couple days of training. So it's kind of like a mini franchise, you know, essentially, is what I've been working towards, but keeping the cost, you know, as reduced as we can, so that, you know, people have an opportunity to do this. So essentially that's been the kind of the latest and greatest projects. Really kind of taking a step back through that project, the Ultimate Coffee Cart. So I did end up building the cart, and so it had a triple sink on it, had a hand washing station, it was all self-contained. It was a good cart. I ended up, the way I made that cart is it would roll into a horse trailer, and then it would lock in, and then you connect your pipings. They just had just little swivel connections, boom, boom, boom. It would be locked into place and connected to the water supply that was held on the truck. And then if you needed to do an indoor catering, you would unlock your piping, roll it out, and then connect your piping to individual, you know, like the 5-gallon water tank, 7-gallon gray tank. So I built that out. Then I worked on the horse trailer, and I built the horse trailer to the kind of this national code that I've been coming up with. And both of those worked really well. I ended up selling it to a gal out of California. She came down and picked it up. And then after that, I worked on building another coffee truck. This one was a mobile coffee roaster. It's a concept I've been wanting to work on for a while. RK drums, if you're not familiar with them, they're basically converted barbecue grills that people put a drum on the barbecue drill and they roast coffee on it. They do a pretty amazing job. So it can be it's an outdoor roaster. It's not something you can carry inside because it's operated by propane. I had always loved the idea of taking like a barbecue truck, and instead of doing barbecue on the back of your truck, doing coffee roasting. I thought, man, that would be great. So one of the gentlemen that had taken one of my classes, his name's Zach, he booked me to do this, and we were able to get the numbers right. And so it was a project I had always wanted to work on. And so that's been the latest project is the mobile coffee roaster. So that one's really exciting. But yeah, so that's basically the story of Green Joe. I mean, that's kind of it's a long-winded story, but that's how I got started in coffee trucking, and why I got started coffee trucking, and my evolution, and kind of where I've gone and what I've learned. It's been a really good journey. I've learned so much. I mean, in so many aspects. In the entrepreneur aspect, I learned a lot. I learned a lot opening up the coffee shop. And although, you know, it didn't turn out to be a successful business venture, it was something I had always wanted to do, and it's off the list now. And, you know, I don't have any regret whatsoever doing it. It was like, you know, my wife and I will always kind of laugh about it. We always look back and we go, oh man, what were we thinking? But, you know, it's bittersweet. I don't regret that one at all. And with the coffee truck, same thing. I mean, and through this podcast, I hope to share some of the journeys that I've been on, because we have some stories. I mean, you know, from doing the Rolling Stones concerts to, you know, 3 a.m. at movie sets, and just there's a lot of stories that went into this journey. And so it's been a good journey. I guess the final message that I have to anyone that's kind of been this far and listened to this podcast, so, you know, if you're an hour into this with me so far, is that the biggest thing is you don't need a whole bunch of money to get started. I didn't have any experience, so I don't think, you know, experience is necessary, is necessity. Does it help? Absolutely it does. Does money help? Absolutely it does. But are these things like a necessity to get started? No, it's not. And, you know, at the end of the day, the biggest thing is just, you know, putting your best foot forward, working your tail off, analyzing what you're doing and seeing the mistakes and trying to get a little bit better the next day. I'm a big advocate that anyone with a little bit of humility and a little bit of gumption can go a long way. So that's kind of my message to you. That's my story, and I am sticking to it. Listen, guys, my name is Vince. I'm with Green Joe Coffee Truck. You can find me on my website. That is www.greenjoecoffeetruck.com. I will put all that good stuff in the description of the video. I hope this has helped anyone that's interested in getting started on this journey, and I look forward to episode 2. Thanks for checking in.